I've been streaming a lot of Empire at War lately, and one question I've gotten is whether proton torpedoes and other missiles within the Star Wars universe are able to bypass shields. This is certainly an understandable question. The Star Wars universe has been inconsistent at best with how it treats shields and munitions. For example, in Empire at War, and most of the mods, missiles directly go through a capital ship shields and can attack and destroy hard points directly. Other mods, like Thrawn's Revenge, do not allow this, and missiles are essentially slower, more powerful lasers. The movies in the expanded universe haven't really been much better, or at least any less confusing. We have this quote from A New Hope.
"A precise hit will start a chain reaction which should destroy the station. Only a precise hit will set up a chain reaction. The shaft is ray shielded, so you'll have to use proton torpedoes."
What's more, in The Last Jedi, we see the Raddus mangled by First Order missiles, but not lasers. So what gives? Now, parts of this will be recap for some of you, but please bear with me. Let's do the basics of the lore, and for that, we'll turn to page 75 of the new Essential Guide to Weapons and Technology. There, we have the following quote. Like concussion missiles and other projectiles, proton torpedoes are extremely useful because they ignore basic energy shields designed as defense against pure energy weapons. Particle shielding will limit the effectiveness of proton torpedoes, but few starships utilize this technology. Okay, so this is pretty simple. It's something a lot of you probably already did know, and which I've covered before on the channel. Hang tight though, as I said, I'll get to that in just a minute. For everyone else, a bit of recap. Star Wars shields come in two flavor, ray and particle. The two together are sometimes referred to generally as deflector shields. Ray shields stop energy weapons like turbo lasers, while particle shields stop, well, particles. Everything from railguns and asteroids to, as we just learned, torpedoes. A ship with only ray shielding, or something like the Death Star's exhaust port, is susceptible to missiles, but not lasers. On the other hand, the Death Star 2, or something like the Scarif shield gate, is protected from both. Now, admittedly, there is a bit of logical inconsistency here. The Essential Guide to Weapons says that ray shields vaporize things that come into contact with them, so I'm not sure how projectiles pass through them harmlessly, or how even fighters pass through them, but this bit of lore is almost never adhered to. We also know that turbo lasers are essentially particle beams, rather than just pure energy or light like a real-world laser, so who really knows? So a lot of you may be thinking, well, that's that. No, torpedoes are not able to bypass shields, but let's look at things with a bit more detail. First of all, there are many situations where a fired munition will bypass an energy shield. First, anytime a vessel wants to launch its fighters, pull in a craft with a tractor beam, or fire their own missiles, they will have to drop their particle shields in order to perform whatever function they're hoping to accomplish. Now, the shields can be dropped and raised independently, and they can go on and off almost instantly, but something like the Venator, for example, is extremely vulnerable when launching fighters, for this very reason. Second, as alluded to earlier, many ships would have possessed only energy shields, and among smaller vessels, particle shields were quite rare. Even on big ships, like Star Destroyers, full combat double-layer deflector shielding consumed a lot of energy very, very quickly. So, if a ship is just idle around a planet or not in combat, it would only have very basic ray shielding active. Successful sneak attacks would thus allow the firing of missiles through the shield before the double deflector shields could be raised. So, if you have a big fleet arriving, it might be a good idea to send a few X-Wings in. If they can target the deflector shields on a ship and take them out before they're ready, the subsequent battle might be much easier. Notably, the Essential Guide to Vessels states that basic ray shields were almost always active, so here, fired munitions have a clear advantage over turbo lasers. One thing to note is that the old Essential Guide to Technology had it the opposite way, where particle shields were invented first, used more commonly, and always on, but the new Essential Guide reversed that, as I've explained. Just in case you weren't confused enough. A final thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that missiles, especially high-yield missiles, can also be used to take down particle shields with extreme effectiveness. We know one technique used, even against large ground-based shields, was to bombard a single point with many munitions at once. Torpedoes were really good for this job because they could be controlled through computers, they could lock onto a target, and they could be fired in bursts or clusters. If you hit the right spot, which would typically basically be away from a shield overlap in the generator. You could take down the entire shield and actually sometimes even disable the generator itself. Either way, you've got an open shot now at a vulnerable target. This is exactly what Wedge and Han did during the opening stages of the Second Galactic Civil War during the Battle of Tralis. Also, concussion missiles, which were generally much more powerful but used at much shorter ranges, could take down shields on their own. They would thus often be fired in staggered pairs. The first concussion missile would take down the shield. The second would actually inflict damage on the hull. Many missile launchers together can easily overwhelm the shields of a capital ship. We saw this with the Battle of Yagdul and the surrender of the Virulence. Other similar quasi-projectile weapons like the seismic charge instead relied on pure force to overload both elements of a deflector shield. Another example is torpedo spheres, which were specifically designed to pierce through planetary shield through continual missile barrage. Anyway guys, that's all for today. I know the answer to this question seemed obvious, but I hope I added enough information to make this video interesting for you guys. Today's question comes from Michael, who asked me to put an Autumn-class cruiser versus an Imperial Star Destroyer. However, I'm going to turn this around and ask you guys, with what we learned about particle and ray shielding today, and of course a Star Destroyer possessed both, how do you think the Autumn, which relied on railguns, would stack up? Let me know that down in the comments. Anyway, until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. As always, may the Force be with you.